Hi there, and thanks for joining me. Now, one of the most common questions I get is this: why do I struggle so much with food? Now, obviously, not everyone asks it that way. Some people ask, why does nothing ever work for me? What's wrong with me? For others, it's why do I overeat? Or why can't I seem to be able to control my eating? Or why do I keep falling off the wagon? And yet others, well, they ask something along the lines of, well, why can I be so successful in other areas of my life, but not with my food? Now, it really doesn't matter how you word it. The fundamental question remains the same. Why is it so friggin' hard to eat like a normal person? So first up in this video, that's precisely the question I want to tackle. And after I've done that, I'd like to share some ideas about what you can do to get yourself unstuck so you can begin to make some real and tangible progress. Okay, so I'd like you to think of this struggle you have with food and with your eating as a bit like being trapped in a maze. So can you imagine being in one of those fancy, beautifully manicured, hedged mazes? One that's kind of 10 foot tall with all kinds of twists and turns and dead ends. Can you picture that in your mind? So we enter this maze, and our goal, of course, is to find our way out the other side. It's to reach the exit on the other far side where we're no longer struggling with food, where we're not overeating, we're not binging, we're not stress eating or emotional eating, we're not yo-yo dieting, we're not falling off the wagon anymore. We're not all caught up in our food-focused thinking and all that stuff. We've just gotten to this place of having a normal, healthy and balanced relationship with food. Now imagine every twist and turn in this maze represents a new attempt to solve your eating struggle. So turning a corner in the maze is like starting a new diet or downloading a new meal plan or joining a new program or downloading a new calorie tracking app to your phone or purchasing a new protein shake or taking a new supplement or reading a new book or trying out a new detox protocol or following a new set of food rules or seeing another dietitian or naturopath or counselor or whatever it is. You get the idea. So it's like you get to a corner in the maze and you find this new thing or this new strategy or approach and this new path to go down and you're excited, right? So you turn the corner and you get started. You're taking action, you're making some progress, and then you get even more excited because finally you feel like this is it. You've found something that could actually work for you. There's light at the end of the tunnel. If I just keep doing this thing, if I just keep heading down this path, I'm gonna figure it out for sure. But then something happens. You hit a roadblock, you get busy, some challenge comes up, life just gets in the way. Whatever it is, progress now stops and you hit a dead end. Okay, so then you conclude, well, this obviously wasn't the holy grail that you thought it was, but you're just not going to give up, are you? You're going to figure this thing out if it's the last thing you do. So you find something else. You take another turn in the maze. And let's face it, just as there's any number of paths you can take in the maze, there's no shortage of information out there about diets, nutrition, eating, meal plans, weight loss and so on. In fact, information overload and conflicting advice is part of the problem. So for example, when I type into Google, how to stop overeating, I get over 12 million results. And let's just see what comes up on page 1. Okay, once we skip over all these ads, the very first article is this one here. 23 effective ways to stop overeating. It's ranking number 1 on Google at the moment. So it's got to be authoritative, trustworthy, and packed full of amazing content, doesn't it? Well, you'd like to think so anyway. So let's check it out. So it's an article written by a registered dietitian. Okay, so again, it should contain some pretty reasonable advice, you'd think. Strategy number 1, get rid of distractions. Okay, so how realistic is that really? Now this idea comes out of the mindful eating space. And sure, I'll admit there is some pretty decent evidence for this type of approach. When people can sit down in a quiet area and put 100% of their focus on the experience of eating, then absolutely those people tend to eat less food. The research backs it up. So my criticism of this strategy isn't that it doesn't work. It does, in theory. The problem is, for the vast majority of people, stepping away from distractions to this extent is almost impossible. We like to have our phones and our laptops with us. We like to watch TV. We like to chat with others and so on. This is just living life in the 21st century. And let's face it, the underlying reason you struggle with food isn't because you're reading emails or scrolling through your Facebook feed while you eat. Becoming distracted around mealtimes isn't the most important thing. That's not the reason you're struggling. It's not the core issue. Okay, so what else is this dietitian saying? Know your weaknesses. Identify the unhealthy foods you can't resist. Keep them out of your home or far out of sight. Okay, so we've all heard this strategy 1,000 times over, right? Just don't bring crappy food into the house to begin with. Sounds simple enough. And logically it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? If it's not in the house, well, you just can't eat it. But actually I have a couple of major problems with this approach as well. Firstly, most of us don't live alone. Most of us have families. And so what happens if one of my trigger foods is ice cream or chips or chocolate? Is it realistic that these foods never make it back into the house ever again? Try explaining that to your partner or to your teenage kids and just see what happens. But the biggest problem with this avoidance strategy is this: it doesn't work. As soon as we tell ourselves that the only way we can control our eating is to no longer go anywhere near our trigger foods, well, that's when these foods wield even more power, because now there's something to be feared and we clearly can't be trusted around them. And it sets up this restriction cycle that'll eventually backfire, because as soon as we restrict anything or tell ourselves that we can't have it, there's a part of our own psychology that'll want and crave it even more. It's just how our minds and brains work. And it doesn't matter how good you think your willpower is, the tension around these restricted foods will build and build to a point where it'll become unbearable. It might take a week, a month, heck, maybe even 3 months, who knows. But at some point, this growing tension, this anxiety, craving, tightness, heaviness, or even this gnawing feeling deep within you will need to be relieved. And the only way to release all this tension is to eat, or overeat, or even binge on the very foods you've been trying to avoid. So that's the problem with avoidance and forced restriction. Rather than breaking the cycle of overeating, guilt, shame, and self-blame, it actually perpetuates it. Okay, so what else do we have in this article? Okay, number 6, reduce stress. Stress can lead to overeating, so reducing the stress in your everyday life is one important step you can take to stop the downward spiral. So again, pretty standard generic advice. I'm sure you've heard it plenty of times. And what's your reaction when you hear this kind of stuff? Reduce your stress. How helpful is it really? I mean, we all live busy lives. Most of us have families which come with all kinds of demands. We have crazy hectic jobs and careers with all kinds of responsibilities and stresses and so on. So let's be real here for a moment, shall we? Whatever stresses you have in your life right now, are they going anywhere soon? Probably not. So if you've got this much stress in your life, and if realistically you can't see it changing too much in the short to medium term, well, when you hear the advice, if you want to get back in charge of your eating, you've got to reduce your stress. How does that make you feel? It kind of makes you feel stuck, doesn't it? The fact is, generalized blanket statements like reduce your stress do more harm than good. Because if stress apparently leads to overeating and you can't find a way to move the needle on your stress level, well, you inevitably end up losing hope on ever being able to end the struggle with food, don't you? And along the same lines, I can't tell you how many times I've heard advice like, look, just go for a walk, take a bath, go get a manicure, go book a massage. Apparently these are the things you're supposed to do so you don't use food as a way to cope with stress. Now, I don't know about you, but if I suggested these kind of things to my clients, they'd laugh at me. I mean, it all sounds wonderful. And sure, in a perfect world, we'd all be getting pedicures and massages and indulging in all kinds of self-care activities. But that's not how life normally rolls. And if we're really honest here, you don't struggle with food because you're not taking bubble baths. Your eating habits and patterns haven't come about because you don't get manicures. So it's crazy to expect that doing these things will suddenly make you a better and healthier eater. Now, look, there's nothing wrong about massages, bubble baths and beauty treatments. They're great. It's just that these things, or the lack of these things in your life, aren't the real issue. Again, they're band-aid fixes. Look, to be fair, I don't want to single out the dietitian who wrote this article, okay? I'm sure she's a lovely person. I'm certain she means well, and nothing she is saying here is controversial or wrong or goes against the standard advice we hear from all health professionals. But that's kind of the problem, because the stock standard advice isn't working for most people who really struggle with food. It just isn't. Okay, so let's go back to the Google search and see what else comes up here. 6 appetite control strategies that helped me stop overeating, by John Fawkes. So who is John Fawkes? Science geek and fitness writer for MyFitnessPal. Okay, interesting. So how qualified do you think John really is? What credentials does he really have other than being a science geek? Anyway, look, let's just see what he has to say. Strategy number 1, add vinegar and cinnamon to meals to control blood sugar. Okay, so right off the bat, I can tell you this article is a complete waste of everyone's time. This person's number 1 strategy for overeating is to throw some vinegar and cinnamon in with your meals. Now, honestly, look, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but it's really important for all of us to understand the difference between a qualified health professional who can interpret research versus a self-professed science and fitness geek who looks at a headline in some news article and then draws his or own conclusions about what that actually means. So yes, there are a small number of clinical studies, well, they're not really clinical studies, they are studies that suggest vinegar and cinnamon can minimize blood sugar spikes. So there is a bit of research out there about that. But to then go on and suggest that somehow this modest research at best makes this a worthwhile strategy for overeating in general, well, that's just total crap. The evidence just doesn't support that kind of approach. Again, if you feel challenged by food or if you're stuck in all kinds of vicious cycles with your eating, do you honestly think these things can be solved by adding a pinch of cinnamon to your morning coffee? I mean, really, come on. Okay, what have we got here? Strategy number 2, eat when you're not hungry. Okay, did I read that right? Eat when you're not hungry. Okay, I did read that right. Okay, look, again, this is just total BS. And unfortunately, this is the kind of rubbish advice that can just keep you stuck for years and years. Now, if you've watched the How to Fix a Broken Diet video training series on my website, I actually go through in quite a lot of detail what eating when you're not actually physically hungry does to your hunger hormones. I explain that quite a bit. Look, and the fact is, we train our hunger, right? So if you routinely eat when you're not really hungry, or maybe you graze on food 4, 5, 6 or 7 or more times throughout the day, well, when you do that, you effectively train your body to expect food at certain regular times. And your body responds by releasing hunger hormones around these times in anticipation that you'll be eating something very shortly. And it's this release of hunger hormones that makes you hungry, so you eat and the cycle just continues. But it all started because at some point in the past, you got in the habit of eating when you weren't actually hungry. So to then go and tell someone, oh yeah, look, if you want to end overeating, well, just start eating when you're not hungry. Look, it's ludicrous, it ignores the science, and quite honestly, it'll keep you locked up in vicious cycles for years. So the whole point of this exercise was to raise your awareness to the kind of rubbish that's out there on the internet, on social media, in forums, in Facebook groups, in magazines, books, blogs, videos, and so on. And look, we didn't even get past the first 2 articles on Google. And that's the thing when it comes to issues of food, nutrition, weight, and so on. Everyone has an opinion, even those who have no place dispensing advice in the first place. So if you're following an influencer or a celebrity or so-called nutrition guru, or maybe you're reading a health blogger promoting something that doesn't stand up to scientific scrutiny or comes with some other ideological agenda, well, if you're doing that, then tread very carefully. So much of the stuff out there is complete bullshit. Sorry for being so crude, but it's the truth. I know you've seen it, and my guess is you've probably fallen victim to it a few times as well. And you know what? That's not your fault. And it's certainly nothing to be ashamed about, because as I said, this kind of trashy advice that's dressed up to look sciencey and trustworthy and helpful, it's literally everywhere. And if it's not total BS, then there's a good chance it's so generalised and cookie-cutter generic that it's just not practically useful or helpful in the real world anyway. But the problem is, you're now in this huge maze with all these different options in front of you, and you don't really know who or what to trust or what direction to head. I'm super stressed, so clearly that's the issue. I've got to work on reducing that. Actually, maybe I just need a better coping mechanisms. Wait up, my blood sugar might be spiking, so I better look at a low GI diet. Actually, no, this video says the keto diet might be even more effective for that. Hang on, I get super distracted when I eat. I should look into this mindful eating thing first. But this website here, that's telling me to eat more often. I better take more snacks to work. Oh dear, perhaps that's not it at all. Maybe I overeat because I'm not fulfilled in my relationship. I really need to get some counselling to work on that before anything else. Or maybe it's all work and career related. Perhaps I just hate my job. But no. This book here, it says it's all about self-esteem. I better get that sorted. Actually, why don't I try that appetite suppressant my GP mentioned? That sounds way easier. Better still, my colleague at work swears by this detox shake. Hang on, I read something about too much insulin making you hungry. I better get that tested first. Wait up, maybe I need more willpower. Let me do a Google search on that and see what comes up. No, second thoughts. Let me just find a better meal plan. Great, here's one for $39. Let's do that. It seems like wherever you turn, there's another path to take and another option to try. Now don't get me wrong, some of these options can actually be helpful. I mean, something like mindful eating, for instance, has some good research behind it, and there's definitely a subset of people out there who will benefit from it to some extent. For others, learning how to better manage stress might be something that gives them more control over their food, for sure. And yet for some others, seeing a counsellor or psychologist to address past traumas, yeah, that can definitely help too. So I'm not saying some of these things can't help at all. Some certainly can. It's just that for the overwhelming majority of people who struggle with food, who overeat, who experience cravings, who find it really hard to remain consistent with healthy choices, who get anxious and overwhelmed by all their crazy food-focused thinking, who waste money on diets and so on. For these people, approaches like these usually don't work over the long term. They don't solve everything because they fail to address the habit circuits and pathways in the brain that keep us locked up in the same old eating patterns and behaviours from one day to the next. And I'll expand on that a bit more in a sec. So either the strategy or the method doesn't work at all, or it'll work, as I said, maybe for a short while, but then at some point it'll stop working. And then your old habits kick back in. The overeating returns with a vengeance, the weight creeps back on, and the frustration, guilt, shame and self-criticism, well, that's now just way off the chart. And so you're left feeling worthless, broken and like a complete failure, because clearly there must be something wrong with you. So you're trapped in this food struggling maze, going round and round in circles, reaching one dead end after the other. And your eating, well, now it seems worse than ever. Now, can you remember back to the very first diet you went on, or the very first program or plan you followed to try and improve your eating? Well, that was the moment you first walked into this maze. And what you initially thought might take you maybe a month or two at most to get sorted, well, now it's been how long? And you're still struggling. How long have you been trapped in this maze? A year? 5 years? 10 years? Honestly, how long has it been? And how exhausting has it been? How much time and energy have you invested trying this strategy over here and then this diet or program over there? How much of your life has been spent trying to work all this stuff out? So this maze you're in, instead of it looking something like this, is it starting to feel more like this? Is this making any sense? Is this what it's feeling like? And now it's like you're so deep in this maze, you're completely lost, and it feels like there's just no way out. And you're frightened to start anything new because you've failed so many times before. So now when you reach a new corner in the maze, you might peek around it to see what's there. But ultimately you run the other way because committing to something new seems way too scary. But the fact is, yeah, you might be lost and stuck somewhere in the maze, but you're not a failure and you're certainly not broken. And yes, there is a way out. You see, when it comes to your eating, your brain, and more specifically this area called your action selection system and 3 very dominant neural pathways that feed into it, well, these are all simply doing what they've been trained and programmed to do. And it's these 3 neural circuits that will ultimately determine why you eat, what you eat, when you eat, how much you eat, and so on. This is why you struggle with food. It's all neuroscience and habit circuitry. And again, I explain this in great detail in the How to Fix a Broken Diet video training. So the key for getting back in charge of your eating is to learn the skills that rewire these pathways, so they support a healthy relationship with food instead of always sabotaging it. You don't need another diet or meal plan or detox protocol or protein shake or appetite suppressant. You don't need another calorie tracking app on your phone. You don't need more rules or more restriction or more willpower. You don't need cinnamon in your morning coffee, or you don't need to carve out 30 minutes for a bubble bath every night. And despite what the mindful eating movement will tell you, you don't need to remove all distractions or chew your food 30 times. Just as you don't need to fix your messy life, quit your stressful job, or heal all your emotional baggage either. None of these things actually do anything to address the 3 brain-based circuits that are at the core of the problem. Eventually, they all lead you to just more dead ends in the maze. So let me really simplify things for you here. The way out of your own private food maze is here and available to you right now if you want it. But first, you've got to be willing to give up all the diets and fads and shakes and so on. You've got to be willing to stop reading all the nutrition blogs and watching all the YouTube or Facebook videos on clean eating or keto or intermittent fasting or whatever it is. And instead of all that, you've got to be willing to explore the idea that maybe, just maybe, you need to be pointed in a different direction and given a few new tools and skills so you can rewire the neural pathways that are really tripping you up. And that's what the Food Freedom Brain Training approach is about. It's an intensive 4-step process designed to get you out of the maze and take you from food struggling to food freedom. Your thoughts and habits and behaviours around food are simply the byproduct of a bunch of neural circuits in your brain that aren't serving you anymore. And so now it's time to create a new set of pathways that serve you way better. We know the brain can change. It's what scientists call neuroplasticity, which means with the right training and with the right inputs and daily practices, it can be rewired and reconditioned to give us some remarkable outcomes. People with chronic pain, anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder, They're rewiring their glitchy pathways and getting results far beyond what most other therapies are able to provide. The research and the clinical studies are out there. It's happening. So yeah, brain training works. And if it can work for these debilitating conditions, it can sure as heck work for cravings, urges, overeating, emotional eating, binging, and so on. And that's exactly what the evidence and the research is demonstrating. So if you'd like to get started down this path, if you'd like me to take you by the hand and guide you step by step out of this confusing and frustrating maze, if you're sick and tired of being in a tug of war with food and with your body, if you're fed up with all the crazy food-focused thoughts that keep hijacking your headspace, if you're done with wasting money on diets, junk food and BS solutions, if you're well and truly over white-knuckling your food choices all week, only to end the weekend in a food coma, if you've listened, read, watched and researched everything out there, yet you're still struggling to make progress, and if you can't stand to waste another day suffering in silence and are now truly ready to not only get back in charge of your eating, but get back in charge of your life, then here's all you need to do. Firstly, go watch the free How to Fix a Broken Diet video training. I've put the link down below. Now this training will take you through the specific 4-step process I use to help people rewire their hungry brains and get back in charge of their eating. And it's the best way to learn if the food freedom brain training approach will be a good fit for you. Then, after watching the training, if you'd like to go even deeper, and if you'd like to learn more about how we would apply the 4-step process to your own personal situation and struggles, then book a free discovery call so we can really work out if the food freedom brain training approach would be a good fit for you. Because without doubt, the fastest, most direct route out of this food struggling maze is to partner with someone who's been through it before and who's led hundreds of people out of the very same maze you're still stuck in. I've put the booking link for that strategy session down below as well. So go watch the training, then book your free session and allow me to introduce you to a brain training process that'll help you break free. That'll show you how to navigate your way out of this never-ending and very frustrating maze so you can be done with all this food struggling, obsession and anxiety with food once and for all. And so you can finally have the energy, the freedom and the confidence to simply get on with living your life. Okay, thanks for watching. I'm Martin Flood, lifestyle medicine practitioner and the founder of the Food Freedom Brain Training Approach. Take care and bye for now.